fiebre el otro día por causa de tu amor, Cristiana.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Tracks from Abroad. This is a show on U of T's campus. My name is Jesse McDougall, and I'm the host of the show. Today, we are speaking to Néstor Rodríguez, who is the Director of Caribbean Studies at U of T. Néstor, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you for the invitation, Jesse. It's a pleasure to be in your show.
Thank you. Well, why don't you tell us about your job as Caribbean Studies Director?
Yes, I started in 2019 as an acting director, and the position became a longer one until 2025. So I have been working mainly in expanding the program towards the Hispanic Caribbean, which is the area that I specialize in. My work at the University of Toronto is mainly in the Department of Spanish and Portuguese, and I teach courses in Latin American literature in general, but specifically my focus and research and teaching is the Caribbean.
Is the Caribbean. When you're saying Latin American literature, what does that exactly look like? How would that be different from somebody studying literature in another part of the world?
Yes, when we talk about Latin America, we're talking about a very vast region that includes all the Spanish-speaking countries, but also the Caribbean, and that is something that is a contested terrain. And usually, the Caribbean is seen as a satellite of the Americas, but it's part of what we call Latin America, and that's one of the, let's say, the goals of our work at the University of Toronto, to try to incorporate a region that usually gets invisibilized by scholarship and also the curriculums in university.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Well, great. Of course, this is a radio show, so we have to talk a little bit about music as well. So could you tell us a bit about not only music, but the dances and sort of the cultural traditions that go along with things like merengue and bachata?
Oh, yes, thank you for bringing that up. As you know, merengue is the national dance in the Dominican Republic, and it's a rhythm that has a long tradition from the 17th century. Those are the origins of merengue, a rhythm that arises from African heritage, and also the contact with other European rhythms, especially the French minuet. Those are the early origins of merengue, but it has evolved to incorporate many aspects from all parts of the world. For example, the traditional instrument used in merengue is the diatonic accordion, which is a German instrument that arrived in the Dominican Republic through merchant sailors from Germany in the 19th century. Mm-hmm. And so it has become the national rhythm of the island, but also it has been contested by bachata, which is very popular in Toronto, actually. I would say that bachata has displaced merengue as a favorite in dance halls in the city, in many areas of North America. Mm-hmm. Bachata has a different origin. Merengue is more of a countryside rhythm. That's the origin of it. The rural areas of the Dominican Republic. Bachata is more of an urban genre. It started in the 1960s, especially in the capital city of Santo Domingo. It was a music that was not accepted by Dominican society until later, way later, in the 1990s with Juan Luis Guerra. He was the one who incorporated that rhythm and gave it, let's say, an international audience.
Yeah, I heard from my student guest that I had on the show. His name is Max. He told me that some of the dance moves, you take sort of small steps. You take small little steps, And that's sort of reminiscent of the slaves who may have had their feet chained together. And he said that might have been the origin of these moves. And this being Black History Month, I wondered if you could get into the slave trade through Dominican Republic and just some of the African heritage that exists in that country.
Yes, and well, first in terms of the theories about the origins of merengue, that's one of them, that it originated from the slave tradition in the island. There are many theories. One of the most confusing one is that is the one that you see in textbooks in the Dominican Republic, about an origin that is exclusively European, which is outrageous. It's obviously a rhythm that comes from the African heritage, but it's a heritage that in the Dominican Republic is difficult to assume. The population is the majority of the population is Black, and the official culture doesn't celebrate that heritage as part of Dominican culture. It's not easy to find ways of incorporating that heritage in a way that Dominicans will feel comfortable with. That is something that has been done in academia and also in the music industry. Many artists that talk about that heritage as central to Dominican culture, but it's still not the official discourse of the nation. And that has produced a lot of scholarship, especially from Dominicans living abroad and in North America specifically.
Would you say that in Dominican Republic, the slave history of that country, is that something that's openly discussed in society, or is it something that people want to move on from and forget about?
Well, it's not discussed, let's say, in the official channels of the Dominican Republic. You won't see the government talking about that openly in any forum. But you have many people producing scholarship and talking about that topic in depth in other areas. That is something that I follow, for example, in literature. Contemporary literature from the Dominican Republic has as one of its main characteristics the incorporation of the African heritage to an idea of the Dominican nation, and that is praiseworthy.
I see. Well, before the interview, we were talking about baseball, and there was a very important milestone that just happened for Big Papi, or David Ortiz. And I'd like to give a shout out to David Goodman, who is a neighbor of mine in Vermont, who religiously follows baseball and is also in radio. Shout out David Goodman. But the point is, as you told me, Nestor, that David Ortiz is now in the Baseball Hall of Fame. Is that correct?
That's correct. And a few days ago, he was inducted to the Hall of Fame of baseball. And that is something of I will say that a huge accomplishment for a Dominican athlete. As you know, baseball is like a religion in the Dominican Republic, and David Ortiz, or the Big Papi, as he's known in North America, is one of those heroes. But there are other 3 Hall of Famers from the island. The first one was Juan Marichal, who was active in the 1960s and mid-70s. He was a pitcher, and he finished his career with the Dodgers, 1975. That was the first one to be inducted to the Hall of Fame. And then you have, of course, Pedro Martinez, who played for the Montreal Expos.
Wow!
That was her first team. Before becoming the idol that he was for the Boston Red Sox. And well, you might remember Vladimir Guerrero. That was the 3rd Hall of Famer from the Dominican Republic. So now his son is playing for the Jays.
I see. Well, here's something I just thought of, is that David Ortiz, I mean, luckily he recovered, but he was shot in 2019. in Dominican Republic. And I want to touch on, it's the athletes in North America, in America, let's say, they're sort of celebrities. And it would be outrageous for an athlete to be shy. So what does this say about Dominican Republic that a star athlete can be involved in something like this?
Yes, no, that's a very, very good question, Jesse. It's one of the big problems in Dominican society. Violence is everywhere, and it has been becoming more and more acute in recent years. That incident that you mentioned about Ortiz was very confusing. From what I received from Dominican media, it was never clarified. We don't know what really happened. Some people say that he was confused by the attacker, and we don't know. But it's a good example of the fragility of Dominican society in terms of the problem with violence, which is rampant in the island.
I see. Where else would you say Dominican society? What are some of the fragilities, from some of the fragile parts, and then some of the strengths of the society?
Well, in terms of the strengths, it has a very good economy. So it's a country that praises itself from having economic growth every year, and is one of the few countries in Latin America with a stable economy. But that is something that you will only see in the channels that the government controls. And when you open a Dominican newspaper, you will never see any articles talking about the big issues there. That is the poverty, the people that don't have access to proper education, or they do, but that education is very poor. And so those are indicators that there are important issues that have not been addressed properly. And I would say that is the major aspect of fragility in Dominican society, the lack of institutions that work, especially in the education sector.
Mm-hmm. I see. And how did you grow up in DR? When was the last time that you were there?
Well, I left the DR when I was very little. I was 12 when my family had to emigrate to Puerto Rico. Mm-hmm. I spent 16 years of my life in Puerto Rico. And it was an economic exile. And in the 1980s, the globalization was taking charge of the country, as it was happening in the rest of Latin America. And yeah, that's how my family ended up in Puerto Rico. And then I emigrated to the US, to Atlanta specifically, to study, and I ended up here in Canada. It's a long journey of. I usually describe my journey as that of a migrant worker. That's how I ended up in Canada, and the Caribbean. Well, the Dominican Republic, as any area of the Caribbean, produces that kind of immigration. It exports people. That's how we could describe the area in general. And my life story is not different from that of many other in the Caribbean.
Mm-hmm. And as we read in news articles and news reporting that there are still thousands of Haitians, I read about people from El Salvador also who have to leave their country. But as you say, a continuous migration. As someone who has made that migration, what do you think about the ongoing migration of people from Latin America north?
That is an issue that will never disappear. I mean, the instability of the governments in the Americas produce that kind of displacement of people. Sometimes the drama is more acute in certain areas. The political instability is really hard, and people lose their lives. But it's a problem that has been there for the whole 20th century, and now it's even more difficult. So the Caribbean migration is parallel to that of other populations in Latin America that try to reach the north part of the continent by any means. Mm-hmm. And usually the path is a long one. People will come from the Caribbean and reach the different islands in the region and make it to places like Chile or Brazil, and from there they will go all the way north. So it's a long path that you could trace easily by reading the newspapers in the region.
Yeah. Well, as you talk about your story, you lived in Atlanta for some time and then came to Toronto. What are some of the cultural communities for Dominicans in each of those cities? Do they represent themselves through, I don't know, through dancing and gatherings, or through food, or are there just neighborhoods that are sort of Dominican neighborhoods?
Well, that's a good question. In Atlanta, I remember that there were pockets of Latino populations that had let's say their own venues, nightclubs, restaurants, and it was a very tight community. And Atlanta is similar to Toronto in terms of having a huge population from Latin America that preserve their traditions and are really proud of their heritage. And in Toronto is smaller in terms of the community, but I mean, it's still very, very strong. There are about, I think in the last census, it was registered that there were about 30,000 Dominicans in Toronto. I don't know where they are. I don't know that many Dominicans in Toronto, but it's a huge community, and yeah, there are specific areas that where this population concentrates. The west side of the city is one of them, and it's a big Cuban community as well, and of course people from South America that have been here since decades ago.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Can you think of any restaurants in Toronto that might be good for Torontonians to see part of Dominican culture? And then you could also talk about any events that the Caribbean, I'm forgetting the term, but the Caribbean Association that you direct. What are some things that you guys are working on for people to engage with?
Yes, in terms of places to go and for the specifically Latin American food, Kensington Market is my favorite area. I mean, there you have a good variety of restaurants that will serve you food from Chile, from Mexico, from El Salvador. I mean, it's a very rich area in terms of the Latin American cuisine. So that will be my recommendation for people who want to try some of the dishes from the Latin American region. The Caribbean Studies program is working on a big project. It's a study abroad program in Puerto Rico for July. That is something that we have been developing since the last year, and is happening despite the pandemic. So that is one of the initiatives that we have developed lately. And also by the end of the semester, there will be a Cuban historian who will be presenting her work in collaboration with the CERLAC program at York.
Oh, wow. Well, if I'm lucky enough, maybe I will get to speak to the Cuban historian and get some Cuban music on Tracks from Abroad as well.
Yes, that would be wonderful. There are other Cuban scholars in the university that you could invite to your show, definitely.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. Well, before we wrap up, is there anything else you'd like to discuss about Dominican Republic or on Dominican music?
Well, I think you have already touched base on two of the most important rhythms in the island, merengue and bachata. But there are many others, especially those rhythms that are connected to the African heritage. Those are minority rhythms that we also are very proud of, like the salves, for example, that are connected to the religious tradition of African origins. And those are rhythms that are very present in Dominican culture, and that people don't know much of because they are not commercial, but they are very important to Dominican culture nowadays.
That's lovely. Well, Néstor Rodríguez is a professor and director of Caribbean Studies at New College at the University of Toronto. Thank you very much for being on Tracks from Abroad.
Thank you, Jesse.